you are calling in from. So for those of you who have done this before, you know what to do. But for those of you that are new, if you can go ahead and find that chat box, and if you can let us know where you're calling in from, and let us know what number event this is for you, and would love to know who is your favorite travel partner. So write that down in the chat box. This will just be a great way for us to get to know you a little bit better before we start our session. So my name is Laura. I am one of the San Diego chapter leaders and one of the TNN virtual event hosts. Ooh, I have been on about 100 or so of these. I've lost track. And I started off traveling with friends, then it progressed to my husband, and now it's with my 2 kids. So I feel like I have always been traveling with people. I am going to quickly share my screen and share with you some things regarding the Nomadic Network. So for those of you that are new, the Nomadic Network is a global community of like-minded travel enthusiasts who have come together to learn and inspire each other to travel better, cheaper, and longer. So at the end of 2019, we launched in a couple cities across the world. You can see from the pictures there. But as everyone knows, the pandemic hit, and that caused us to pivot into these virtual events, which has actually been amazing because now we're able to offer 3 different types of events to all of you. So the first type we have are these travel presentation style events, such as the one is today, where we invite a speaker to come speak to all of us on a certain subject matter. We have those throughout the rest of the year. And then we have regional happy hours, where those originally started in person, then they moved to virtual, and those happen all over the globe in different cities, obviously. And then now we are trying to have a mixture of some virtual, some in person. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the call. We can go through our calendar and see if there's one coming up near you. And then we have monthly book clubs where we invite an author to come and speak to us about his or her book. And this is more informal, where you can go off mute to ask your question to the author. It's just a great opportunity to get up close and personal, maybe with one of your favorite authors. So a couple things to keep in mind for today. I see a lot of you with your cameras on. This is awesome. Thank you. It's always fun to see you all. I will keep everyone muted though, just so we can make sure we hear our presenter, Kayla. But use that chat box. This is a great place where you can connect, share any of your relevant experiences or tips, and ask questions. So if you have a question, if you don't mind just typing that word question first, then jot it down. I will keep track of it and make sure we get it answered for you after the session. And then please know that all of our speakers do this out of the kindness of their heart. And so we're so thankful in advance for having Kayla here, sharing with us her knowledge and expertise regarding this subject matter. And we are here to learn, satiate your wanderlust, and have fun. So this should be a really fun conversation. We're excited to have you all joining us. And then if you're not aware, we do have this membership community, which is called Nomadic Map Plus. There's a link right there below. All of our events are recorded. And so you can always, if you miss one, you can always go back and watch it at your own convenience. And I'll share again at the end of the call a little bit more about that and all the different perks that are available. Hopefully everyone is following us, but if not, you can head on over to our Instagram account at the.nomadic.network. We share all of the events that are coming up and tons of fun things. So hopefully you can follow us there as well. Now, the reason you are all here, I am so excited to introduce our speaker for today. So Kayla is a full-time transformational coach and digital nomad. For the past 6 years, she has been supporting her clients to create their most potent and powerful lives, specifically in the realms of purpose, presence, and partnership. And over the last year, she has been living and working abroad in various parts of Mexico with her partner. So we are so thrilled to have you here joining us today, Kayla. I will let you take it over from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Okay, so I'm so excited to have this opportunity to share my presentation today, which is about traveling better together. So we're going to look at some questions to ask your travel partner before going on a trip. I want to note that all of what you're learning today is my embodied lived experience. These questions have been honed over many trips that I've taken with my partner. So before we get to the questions, I'd love to share a little bit more about how these questions came to be, how they got started. So let's go ahead and share this photo. That is our cover photo. This is me and my partner, Ryan. Last year in 2020, my intention, one of my biggest intentions for the year, was to find a romantic partner who would meet me in every possible way. And so when the pandemic hit, my hopes were dashed around finding someone. I don't know if you can relate to me, but I loathe dating websites. So meeting someone in person felt almost impossible as the world shut down. Now, luckily, I was working with a coach at the time, and she made a very interesting suggestion. She told me, why don't you just start networking for your person, similar to how you network for business? And I thought that was completely revolutionary. So the one thing that COVID did not take away from us was our ability to connect over Zoom. And so I had been spending a lot of time connecting with people from around the world through my various travel groups that I'm a part of. And so I started to ask at the end of the conversation, hey, I'm looking for a man. These are some of the qualities that I'm looking for. Who do you know? So one day, my friend Ben, who I had met at the end of May, he recommended Ryan. He recommended that I connect with him. And so he introduced us. We got on a virtual coffee. And lo and behold, the entire 60 to 90 minute conversation, we ended up talking about travel the whole time, which of course was great because I love travel. But I also figured that he wasn't romantically interested in me. So we had a great conversation around travel. And even though my hopes were dashed that maybe this wouldn't work out, he said something at the end of our conversation that really caught my interest. He said that he was thinking about relocating to Mexico. And, this was July of last year, so traveling wasn't really on the table at that point. So I was very intrigued, like, you can travel to Mexico right now? And he said, yeah, I'm thinking about relocating down there for a long period of time, just quarantining and, loving my environment. And so we got off the call, and that just stuck with me for the next 3 weeks. And, as I'm living with my parents, I was in Bali earlier in the year, had to come home to be with my parents for 3 months. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get out of here. And so if I'm going to create my life and I want to live it in the way that I want somewhere new, I want to do it with someone new, I want something exciting, I decided to message him, and I asked him if he would be willing to rent a 2-bedroom Airbnb and move down to Mexico. And he said yes. And so lo and behold, even though we went on this trip as friends, we went in with a non-romantic intention, I still decided that I was going to use this opportunity to practice new ways of being with a man. My tendency previously had been to hide parts of me, to make myself small, to hide my depth and not be fully expressed as who I am. And so going into this trip, I decided, maybe there's no romance here, but I'm still going to show up in the way that I want to with a man. So the first day we got to Mexico, a few hours after we had both arrived, we're complete strangers in the kitchen of our Airbnb. I stare straight into his eyes and I say, so I need to be real with you. Would you be willing to relate to each other consciously on this trip? And would you be willing to use this trip in service of our growth? And to my surprise, he was a resounding yes. He didn't look at me like I had 10 heads. And so in that moment, I was able to fully be me, to be fully expressed. And what unfolded from there, we were able to have some of the deepest conversations that I've ever had with a man, a complete stranger. And it was the result of these conversations that allowed our trip to go the way that it did. After the initial conversation, which I'm going to be sharing with you today, the questions that we asked each other, we ended up becoming romantic partners. 2 weeks in, he was completely blown away by my ability to communicate and to relate to one another during this trip that he asked me out on a date, and the rest is history. So let's go ahead and set some context for our call. So what is conscious relating? So to me, conscious relating is about 2 different pieces. The first piece is it's about bringing a deeper level of intention and purpose to a relationship. So it's using each other and the relationship in service of something greater. And an example that I can give that's non-romantic is if you have a friend, 2 friends per se, and maybe they get together and they realize that they share purpose in this world and that they both have missions that are very aligned with each other, and they decide to become business partners, and they decide to use the container of their friendship for something greater, to make a greater impact in the world. That's a perfect example of what what it means to bring that deeper level of intention and purpose to a relationship. The second piece is that it's about bringing to light what typically remains in the dark when it comes to how we relate. Unfortunately, as kids, we're not really taught how to have those open, transparent conversations. And I think the majority of us tend to shy away from those. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't have to. And so we kind of let relationships unfold instead of being really upfront and honest from the get-go. And so conscious relating is really about having those open, honest conversations with your partner. Now, it's important to note that it is not limited to romantic partnership. It can occur in any kind of relationship where there is mutual agreement. And I want you to keep that in mind for our conversation today. So next, why bring conscious relating to travel? What I found is that when traveling becomes a shared experience for growth, with both travelers actively engaged in each other's desired outcomes, they tend to leave the trip feeling empowered and fulfilled. So just think about it. If you tell someone how you want a trip to go before you go on it, then you can help each other have the best possible time. If you keep it to yourself and let the trip unfold, there's going to be a lot more room for hiccups. Also, when travelers are able to see and understand each other clearly, connection gets created on a deeper level. So not only do you get to have a fabulous trip, you get to deepen your relationship with someone else. Lastly, when the guesswork of relating is eliminated, there's less room for conflict, whether that's outward or inward, and more room for an ease-filled and magical trip. So when I say outward conflict, maybe you're the kind of person that tends to argue, especially if you're going away with your family. You might get into a lot of arguments. Or maybe you take conflict and you turn it inward. And maybe you go on this trip and you're really frustrated because your needs aren't getting met, but you say nothing about it. And so you spend your entire trip feeling that frustration inside. It takes away from having the most magical trip that you could have. So before we get into our questions, let's talk about setting the container. So I don't recommend springing this conversation on your travel partner. You're probably not going to get where you want to go with it if you do that. So I definitely recommend to ask your travel partner ahead of time to have this conversation. So before you go on a trip, ask their permission. Hey, would you be willing to set aside 60 to 90 minutes to have a conversation and set some intentions for our trip? Cool, okay. Now the other thing is I don't recommend to do the conversation over text or email. This is really, really important. This is supposed to be a co-creative experience. So I recommend having it either in person or over the phone. Next, you're going to want to bring a pen or a paper or your computer with your notes section so that you can type out any notes and any answers to your questions. And my last piece of guidance for setting up the container, you're going to want to answer the questions separately first. So together, you definitely want to be together, answer them separately, and then you're going to want to share your answers. So let's go ahead and move into our questions. So question number one. What is your vision for the trip? So this is a pretty broad question, so I'm going to break this down into some sub-questions for you. So you want to think about, if this trip could unfold in the best possible way, how would you want it to go? And you can usually look for your vision by what's going on in your mind. You know, what do you see? How do you see this trip unfolding? What would an ideal day look like? What would you like to see, do, and or experience? How do you want to feel on this trip? So you want to answer all of these questions, and what you're going to get is your vision that you have for the trip, whether it's a vacation, whether it's like a month that you're traveling with someone, whether it's 6 months that you're traveling abroad with someone. Once you have your visions, go ahead and share it with each other just to get on the same page and look at, oh, okay, this is how you see it going. This is how I see it going. This is important to know. Question number two. So what do you want most out of the trip? So this is where we're kind of taking that broader vision and really honing in on the most important pieces. So what is one key intention that you are seeding for the trip? Is it relaxation? You know, if you're going on a vacation with your family, do you guys want to relax? If you're going on vacation with your family, is your one key intention connection? Maybe it's personal growth. Maybe it's self-discovery. What is that one key intention? And also, what is that one must see, must do, or must experience that you would just be unwilling to miss out on? Again, these are important things to share with your travel partner so that you're both on the same page. Question number three. So what are your expectations for the trip? You're going to sit separately, list them out, and then you're going to compare them. And where there's similarities, that's going to be really easy to create some agreements. So if you both expect that you're going to be eating out every dinner, cool, you can make an agreement that says, hey, we agree to eat out for every dinner. Where there are differences, that's where we want to pay more attention. Okay, and when Ryan and I were on our first trip in Tulum, there were a couple of differences that came up that we would have never known about if we hadn't sit down and done this. One of those expectations that differed was transportation. I mean, it was still early in COVID. I didn't feel comfortable taking public transportation, so I expected that we would take a private car from the airport to Tulum. He did not. He expected that we were going to take public transportation the entire way. And so it was important for us to look at this difference and come to a compromise that we could both agree to. So I think what we ended up doing, we decided to take public transportation down to Tulum. And then we decided that on nights where we would want to go out for a nice dinner or go out, like to a restaurant, we would take a taxi. So again, we found a really great compromise for the transportation piece. So we avoided potential pitfalls that could have happened if we both have very different ideas of what transportation should go like. Question number 4. So what are your needs during this trip? Slightly different from expectations and still really important to look at. So you're going to list out your needs. What do you need on this trip? Then you're going to compare them with your partner. And then you're going to discuss how you can respect each other's needs and how you can help each other get your needs met. So for example, when Ryan and I sat down and we had this initial conversation, something interesting that we noticed was that we both actually had a need for connection and silence. And I think when you meet a stranger for the very first time, it's a natural tendency to want to fill all of the space with talking. And it was interesting that we both had a need for silence. And so once we saw that and we brought it to the table, it felt much more natural and easy to give each other silence, to create those pockets of silence. So one of us wasn't feeling like, oh my gosh, is this weird that we're not talking? Does he want to talk? Does she want to talk? It took all of that guesswork out of it. And so we were able to agree to create pockets of silence with each other, as well as pockets of connection. Another need that I had during the trip, I needed time after my calls with my clients to decompress. And since Ryan wasn't working at the time, he was actually applying for jobs, he had a lot more space in his day than I did. And so he was like ready to, connect and engage when I was done work, and I wasn't. I needed some time to be silent. And so we had to create an agreement where I would come to him when I was done with work and let him know, hey, I'm ready to engage now. I've taken my space. We're all good. Another area where if we wouldn't have talked about this up front, we wouldn't have known that. And it could have created some friction. He could have started to get on my nerves if he kept coming to me after my calls and I'm needing that time to decompress. So another really great opportunity to make the trip go more smoothly is by looking at your needs and creating agreements so that you can help each other get those needs met. So question number 5, I love this one because it's just pure curiosity. Why did we decide to do this trip together? I mean, if you could go on this trip with anyone, you could go with a friend if you're going with a partner, you could go with a partner if you're going with a friend, or you could go just your immediate family as opposed to your bigger family. Like, why did you decide to do this trip together? What is the purpose of taking this trip together? Question number 6. So this is starting to get into the greater purpose for the trip. So what is this trip in service of individually and together? I truly believe that travel is one of the most profound containers to create personal growth, to discover things about yourself that you could have never known. And so when we were going to Tulum, that was one of my big desires, was to use this trip in service of our growth. And so how do you want this trip to help you grow? How I wanted the trip in Tulum to help me grow is this was my first extended period being in a foreign country, like living there. And so I wanted to grow my sovereignty. I wanted to show myself that I could live independently in another country where they don't speak my language, where the culture is completely different. And so for me individually, this was really about creating independence in a completely new and different land. How can you help each other grow? With Ryan, part of how I saw myself growing in the container of our relationship was allowing myself to become comfortable being fully expressed with a man that I didn't know. And so this was really good practice for me Because if I was going to date someday, I want to be fully expressed. That's part of what was creating all the problems for me in the first place. And so having this container with him and letting him know, hey, this is how you can help me grow. I want to create a safe space where I can express myself, where I can be my authentic self. Can you help me with that? And so once we identified how we each wanted to grow individually and together, we were able to design our trip so that we could make these things come to fruition. So I think Ryan and I created an agreement that, we would be fully expressed with each other. We would be honest with each other at all times and communicate to the best of our ability. We actually started to have weekly check-ins because our trip was so long. We had some weekly check-ins that really allowed us to go deeper together and make sure that I was expressing myself. If I wasn't expressing myself, this was the time every week where I could express myself if I missed it throughout the week. Okay, last question, and one of the most important: how will we handle conflict if/when it arises? So for this question, you want to dig deep into yourself. So take out your notebook. How do you tend to handle conflict? Okay, how do you know? Are you a fighter? Are you a fleer? Are you a freezer? What is your go-to strategy when it comes to conflict? I took a trip with a friend, an extended trip across the United States in 2013. And each of us, we tended to push things down. We tended not to talk about them. If anything came up, we avoided it like the plague until we couldn't. And then we had these outbursts with each other. And so this is where we want to look at that. What are your go-to strategies? Do you tend to push it down? Or do you tend to get into an argument and start fighting? Next, how do you want to handle conflict? Do you want to keep recreating that pattern, or do you want to do it differently this time? So if you're someone who tends to flee and avoid and push it down, maybe you want to handle it by being honest and upfront about when you're feeling frustrated or when something's not sitting with you well. And so when you have this conversation with your travel partner, like, hey, this is how I typically do conflict, this is how I want to, then you can help each other. You can become teammates, partners, in not only having a really amazing trip, but helping each other to have an even better trip by being fully expressed and avoiding potential conflict that can ruin your trip. So once you both see how you tend to handle conflict and how you want to handle conflict, that's when you form agreements. So maybe the agreement is, hey, I'm going to share when I'm really frustrated. And maybe the agreement for the other person is to listen, to truly listen and take it in. And if it creates a reaction in them, maybe the agreement is, hey, I might need to take some space before I come back to you and share my part of the thing. And so from here, you can start to figure out conflict in a much more peaceful and easy way, which will, again, only create a better part for your trip. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is conscious check-ins, which I alluded to a couple questions ago. So if you're going on a vacation, conscious check-ins might not make sense, although they could. You might want to do like a little daily quick check-in every night to see how everyone, especially with a family, how everyone's feeling. On longer trips, you might want to do these weekly. Ryan and I actually decided to sit down every Sunday for an hour, and we would check in around those goals that we set for ourselves. So how was I doing with my sovereignty? Like, was I navigating living in a new country more easy, or was I having trouble? Was I being fully expressed with him? And if I wasn't, what was there to express? We checked in around our relationship dynamics, like, hey, did I do anything to annoy you this week? Do we need to revisit our agreements around expectations or needs? Is there a need that's popping up that I can help you get met? So again, we took that initial conversation and just basically had these weekly conversations to check in around the initial conversation to make sure that we were on track and that we were really having the best trip that we could. So yeah, they're important if you would like to have them. So lastly, I'd love to share some next steps with you. As I've shared today, it's very general information. So if you want specific individualized guidance, either around traveling with a partner or creating love abroad or living and working abroad, and I'm happy to share my wealth of knowledge and experience. So go ahead and grab some time on my calendar. I'd love to set up a virtual coffee. I also just love meeting new and interesting people around the world because I think it's really powerful to live a global life and have a global network. So I'd love to connect with you. And then if not for the virtual coffee, feel free to follow me on Instagram. I love taking photos of my journey, and I love pairing them with words of wisdom, things that I'm learning on my personal growth journey, insights that I'm having around travel and living and working abroad. So you can go ahead and follow me there, and really, really appreciate my time here today. So let's go ahead and open up for Q&A if you guys have any questions.
Kayla, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Real quick, I was too slow to jot down the coffee chat link. If you wouldn't mind just jotting that in the chat for everyone, that would be perfect. But wow, what a great way to think through everything. I've traveled a lot and I have never asked those questions to a friend, my spouse, or my kids. And I think that's so important because definitely a lot of those issues can be avoided before you travel. So I think it's such a great thing that you've done that. So I'm curious, how did you come up with those questions, or what led you to wanting to ask those? What was kind of the first reason behind all of that?
I love that question, Laura. So as I had mentioned, I was working with a relationship coach at the time, and I just thank God every day that I had her in my corner. I had come to one of our sessions with a request like, okay, I want to relate with this person consciously. I want to make sure we have the best chat, or sorry, the best time. How can we, can you help me come up with some questions to ask him that will allow us to really dig into ourselves and to be able to have a trip? And so, you know, she asked me what I felt curious about. And so some of these questions came up, and some of the ideas that she had ended up forming into these questions. So I can't underestimate the power of collaboration and having someone in your corner to help you with these things.
Okay, perfect. And then is that what led you into becoming a transformational coach, or what was the background on that?
No, I've actually been a coach for 6 years. My road trip in 2013 was kind of the big event of my life that put me on the path. I was having my quarter life crisis, as I call it back then, just questioning what my purpose was in the world, and was going through a hard time with a breakup. And so my best friend and I decided to take 2 months off of work and head out across the country. And the intention was to heal our hearts because she was going through a breakup as well. And on that trip, I tapped into some kind of power. Like, I realized this was something I always said I wanted to do, and I did it. I made it happen. And so I thought, if I can do this, like, what else can I do in my life? And so I was really tired and sick of my job at the time. And so I came back feeling like I need to live this life every day. I mean, I still remember the goosebumps covering my arms. I felt fully alive and free every single day on that trip. So how was I going to create a lifestyle where I could travel? And I have a background in mental health. And so I took my mental health job and turned it into my own business, and went from there.
Perfect. That makes sense. And what a great background to have. I can see how it definitely has helped form these questions and just how you're progressing through all of this. So that's wonderful.
Yes,
All right. So James had a question. Do you have a book? I don't believe you have a book that you've written, but maybe you should, in regards to partner travel. I know you have written articles on that, so maybe you could drop that link as well. And so maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into what you've written. And if you haven't written a book, if you have one maybe that you would recommend, or just your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I have not written a book yet, although that is in store for me. Ryan, my partner, is the one writing the book right now. But I haven't written specifically much about traveling and partnership, but I do have 2 master classes on conscious dating, which is, again, really digging into the internal shifts that I had to create within myself in order to become the woman that created that partnership with my man. And then my second masterclass is actually coming out in September, and that one is going to be more about conscious relating. So once you're in relationship, using these tools to help just create a better, more connected, more profound relationship with another person. So while they're not necessarily geared towards travel, Ryan and I use a lot, and they're embodied tools. So these are tools that I use with him while on the road. We have been in Mexico for 5 months the first time, 5 months the second time, and we're going back for 6 months now. And without these tools on this trip, I mean, yeah, like it definitely makes it much easier to know these tools and be able to relate to each other in this way. So it's not necessarily linked to travel, but it is more overarching around conscious relating.
And to find out information on those master classes, can we just go to your website?
Yeah, I think under the Work With Me tab, there's a section that says master classes, and you can go ahead and the conscious dating master class is the only one up right now, but the conscious relating one will be open soon.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm curious, when you asked these questions to Ryan, was there a more difficult one for him or one that you thought was more uncomfortable? I was just curious what his thoughts were.
Well, Laura, would you mind if we actually took him off of mute and see if he can answer that question for himself?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. All right, let's see. Ryan, I am asking you to unmute. What was the hardest question for you?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot right now. I almost want to go back and look at all the questions, but oh man, I think for me, probably the how do I avoid or the conflict resolution question was probably the most difficult one for me. I feel like I'm a peacekeeper and a lovemaker at heart. Just I don't like conflict, and I've never had someone ask me, how do you handle conflict? And so I really had to think about that and think about some previous ways that I handle conflict in my life. And I found like I'm kind of a freezer. I just freeze people out. And I just won't talk to them. I'll just give them the silent treatment. And we came to an agreement around, when we do have that conflict, we're not going to freeze each other out. We're going to talk about it. And it may not be immediate. She may have to give me some time and some space, but we agreed like we're not going to end the night on a negative point. We are going to talk it out and go to bed and end the night, end the day on a positive note. So for us, it was just communicating that and realizing, hey, I do this thing and I need to push past that comfort and come out on the other side to a higher level.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I love that you jumped on and were our guest speaker. This is great.
Of course.
It's good to hear your perspective about it as well, because I'm sure when Kayla first asked you, to go through these questions, I'm sure you've never been asked that before.
Never in my life have I been asked those questions. And they're such simple questions, but they really make you think. And it really and truly took our time in Mexico to a whole nother level. There was just no second guessing. So I knew exactly where she stood. She knew exactly where I stood. And not to say it was perfect, but it took a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I know so many people who have traveled just with one person, whether it's a friend or a stranger, and they've never, as far as I know, have asked questions like that. And then they've learned that their travel style is so different, and they realize, they don't want to travel with that person after that trip. So rather than have a miserable trip, I think it's so great that you do this, just to think through these things, because it can really change. And I think you don't realize that maybe you act a little differently at home than you do on the road. So thinking about conflict resolution and all that's going to be different on how you handle it once abroad.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. If anyone has any questions for Ryan too, feel free, you guys can jot them down in the chat box, and we can have either Kayla or Ryan answered, since we get the team of them here.
Yes.
All right, Kayla. So Debbie has a question. So she would like to know, are you still in Mexico? And how long do you plan to stay there? Where to next? You can just give us a little update on all your plans.
Yeah, great question, Debbie. We are currently not in Mexico right now. We came home on August 4th to Massachusetts, where my family lives, to reset our visa and also to take care of some things that needed to be taken care of that you can't take care of in Mexico. But we are actually going back next week, next Wednesday, September 1st. We are flying down with my cat this time, and we will be living in Sayulita for at least 6 months. We discovered Sayulita on our last trip to Mexico. We did a month in each different location, and Sayulita was by far our favorite. It was absolutely beautiful, stunning. We loved the energy. It just had everything that we were looking for. So we're going down to do this extended stay. What's next after that? We're not sure, because Ryan is writing his book right now, and by that time it will hopefully be finished and done and ready for publishing. And so at that point, we might be traveling more around the world while he's speaking and sharing more about that. Or maybe, I'll end up staying in Mexico with my cat. Who knows? Life is kind of up in the air, but definitely we love traveling and we love long-term travel and experiencing experiencing different places in the world, because it really does create a different kind of perspective for life and creates growth in the most magical of ways. So, yeah.
And Kayla, what are you doing for accommodation there? Did you already book something?
Yeah, so little tip for anyone who wants to kind of live this lifestyle. We booked an Airbnb there for our month that we stayed, and we loved it. It actually is a one floor in an expat's home. He designed it. He's from Vermont, so right next door to me in Massachusetts, and he lives there with his family. And so we talked to him one day and we're like, hey, we love this apartment. Would you be willing to do a monthly rental outside of Airbnb? And he said, absolutely. And so we came up with, at least 6 months to start, and we saved a bunch of money too from not booking on Airbnb. So I highly recommend to go that way. You can look on Facebook groups for accommodations, but I just loved, we knew him, we trusted him, we got a feel for the place. And so we're really excited. We live like 5-minute walk from the beach. So it's going to be fun.
Oh, we are all so envious. That sounds amazing. And Kayla has another travel partner besides Ryan that she's bringing with her.
Don't know if she'll answer the questions in the same way, but
exactly. But that'll be a fun adventure as well. So that'll be great. All right. I had another question for you in terms of if you're traveling with a group, not a large organized group, but let's say a group of friends. Do you recommend asking these questions to them as well? Or how would you handle that in, let's say, like a 5 to 10 person group, or 3 or more?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'd say like probably like a family size, like a family of 4. I think you would be able to sit down and really do it together, especially if your kids are younger. I would love to hear their perspectives as parents. Maybe they won't necessarily have as much weight in, creating the agreements, but I think it would still be really cool to hear their perspectives. And then for larger travel groups, you could try like everyone kind of journaling and going around robin and sharing. It might look a little different. It might be harder to create a coherent trip with that many people. The other thing that you could do is go into little small pods. Like if you have 10 people, split up into 3s and see how you can help each other in your little pod. Make sure that you're, at least being, if you're getting into conflict, maybe they can help you advocate, or they can hold you accountable to handling conflict in a different way, or maybe kind of calling you out if you're not showing up in that way. So kind of like little teams, smaller teams that could help each other with the overall larger trip. So that would be my 2 ideas for that.
Yes, I think it's great. I'm actually going on a smaller girls trip, just local, just 2 hours away or whatever, but I'm going to try to put some of those in place because I think it'll be good just to get a sense of, where everyone is before you even begin the trip. And I've never done it before, so it'll be fun to do.
Yeah. And, I also recommend too, something that Ryan and I do want to try. So I'll be completely transparent. We haven't tried this yet, but our families have both come to visit us in Mexico over the past year. And it's a very different experience because we're living there, but they're coming down thinking that it's a vacation. And so that is also a really good situation to use this to sit down and have a conversation with your family. Like we do want to do this the next time we have a family come visit, is just sit down and say, hey, like these are all the answers to our questions, and really get on the same page that this isn't a vacation for us. We might not be able to like drop our lives and, be your tour guides for the week. So I think in those scenarios, this conversation really becomes a powerful tool.
Yes, that I've never thought of it that way. That's so right. Because when you're living somewhere, you don't necessarily think about everything that anyone else might want to do when they're coming in to visit. So, and they're going to have such different expectations. So
yes.
There's so many different ways you can apply this. I mean, I was telling Kayla before, I have 2 teens. And so this will be interesting to sit down and talk to them about traveling, because I know what their thoughts and desires would be for the trip are going to be very different than what my husband and mine are. But to get you all on the same page, I just love that you can apply this to every different stage of who you're traveling with and whatnot.
Exactly. It's really universal.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kayla. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop them below. I think you were so thorough and everything. I think we all have a wonderful list of how to go about approaching this. I hope everyone takes actions. Don't know how many people have trips planned, but definitely put these into play. When you do, it'll be amazing. Ryan, thank you for being a guest star on our show today. This is wonderful to have you as well and hear your perspective, because I know two of you are a team in this, so it's fantastic. And Kayla, do you have anything else to share before, or let us know? I did drop your information in, and she did put the link to the for the virtual coffee, so you all have that there. But if there's anything else you have to add before I share a couple more things about the Nomadic Network, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to share one more thing. It came across to me that maybe the slides could have been pretty quick moving through them. So if you do want a copy of the questions, like, please feel free to reach out. You can send me a message on Instagram or email me through my website, and I'm happy to send you the slides if you need those.
Okay, that is perfect. And I will drop your contact info again one more time so everyone has that. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. This has been so informative, I know for me, and I'm sure for everyone else. So I really appreciate your time. So I am going to share my screen one more time to let you all know about some things that are coming up with the Nomadic Network. So if you head on over to our calendar of events, which you will see at the link here, nomadicnetwork.com/events, we have them all the way out to the fall. As I mentioned, we have 3 different types. So we have the travel presentation style events. So the next one we have is on Ghana, Africa. Why moving there would be a smart idea. And that is on August 31st. And then we have on September 2nd, 30 tips to plan your next trip to Mexico City. So some great different talks on different destinations in the world. We have tons more in September. So take a look at that calendar. And then, as I mentioned, we have these regional happy hour events. So our next one is in the Pacific Northwest. This is virtual on September 1st. So if you're in the area, or if you're not, and you just want to meet some people, feel free to jump on that. And then we have one for anyone that's in California. I'm hosting that one. That'll be on September 8th. And then we actually have a lot of in-person ones in September as well. So check those out. It would be fun to see people out again in this community. And then, as I mentioned, we have monthly book clubs. So we have our next one on September 1st on Wednesday. This is with Mark Adams on Turn Right at Machu Picchu. I still have to read this, and I've heard it's phenomenal. So if anyone has read it or hasn't yet, grab that book and then come to this on September 1st. And these, as I was mentioning before, are wonderful. They're really informal. We unmute you. You get to ask your question directly to the author. So it's great just to have an up close and personal interaction with them. And then we have Lola coming to talk to us about her book in October on In Every Mirror She's Black. So phenomenal authors, phenomenal books. Hopefully you can join us for those. And then again, as I mentioned, we have this Nomadic Mat Plus community where we have all of these wonderful perks you get, such as the event replays as this one today and any others in the future. We have monthly giveaways. This month, I know they're giving away a domestic airfare to wherever you are in the world, and you get one free flight for that. Nomadic Mat will share personal stories. There's live Q&As, exclusive Facebook group, you name it. So for just a couple of dollars a month, you have access to all of this. And in my opinion, it's such a great way just to give back to Nomadic Mat and the TNN community for all they've given us for the past year and a half. That's it, everyone. Thank you all for joining us, whether it's morning, lunchtime, evening, wherever you are, and just being a part of this community and supporting each other, supporting Kayla, supporting TNN. It's so fun to have you all here and love seeing you. So hopefully we'll see you soon at another event, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for coming.